where does the corporation soul actually come from? What's its genesis? The corporation soul we can trace back to the time of Noah, indeed beyond Noah in the Bible, where the patriarchal type of tradition in families at that time sensed that they had an obligation to acquire resources in their lives, and when they found someone that was in need, another family, another individual that would come to them that needed water, that needed food, needed clothing, it was their obligation to give whatever those individuals needed to them such that they could sustain their lives. So if it was water, it was water. If it was gold or silver, it was gold and silver. If it was clothing, they gave them clothing. Food, they gave them food. This is the genesis of the first time we see a corporation soul in something written. We know that Abraham did this from a book called the Book of Joshua. We also see it in the Old Testament. There is some writing and some commentary that Abraham may have been the first corporation soul that we know of that's recorded in what we know as the Bible. But it also has a modern application. A corporation soul today is recognized in 17 states by statute, and also it's recognized in 19 states by case law. The corporation soul is recognized in the balance of states by private charter. And those states, the statutes vary in terms of their recognition. You'll find corporation soul in use today modernly in a variety of different environments. You'll find that 2/3 of the Catholic dioceses in the United States are the corporation soul. You'll find that in the Masonic tradition, most of the fraternal lodges that are Masonic, pre-accepted Masons, those are corporation souls. You'll find corporation souls in a variety of different educational forms. For example, the Regents of California, the trustees of Dartmouth College. You'll also find them in hospitals, the Shriners Hospital, the Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word in Texas, or for that matter throughout the southern United States. That's a corporation soul. So a corporation soul is both an ancient tradition and it has a modern application. It distinguishes itself from other forms of business organizations in that there is one person in charge of the corporation soul, not a board, and not a variety of different people as a committee. Corporation souls truly understood are about your calling in life. Your calling in life may or may not be what you're doing today in a job or some kind of vocation. When God called me and said, I want you to be a missionary. But my vocation and my training up until that time had been an attorney. And when God called me into the ministry away from what I was trained to do and what some people would say I was good at doing, I had to arise and go and do that. And the corporation soul truly understood is the how. How do I do that? How do I do that without compromising the values that the Lord has told me I must live by in order to carry out His calling? If the Lord tells me, well, I want you to follow the 10 Commandments without fail. I want you to follow the Golden Rule without fail. I want you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you without fail. Can I do that in other corporate structures? Sometimes yes, but oftentimes I can't because we're asked to make compromises all the time for business objectives. In a corporation soul, those problems are not present. In the general structure of the corporation sits outside of the statutes, and because it sits outside of the statutes, it's not regulated by the statutes. The states don't create the corporation soul, they simply acknowledge it. And that's its distinguishing characteristic. The corporation soul is not like anything else that you've ever seen. There is no synonym that would apply to a corporation soul. It is not like a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. It is not like a partnership. It is not like, some people sometimes call it, a sole corporation. If you just reverse the words, a sole corporation is not a corporation soul. It is something which is unique that allows you to specifically carry out God's calling in your life in a way which does no injustice to the foundational principles that the Lord has asked you and all of us to live by. One of the questions has to do with the legality of a corporation soul. If it has these benefits of being outside of the, quote, legal system, is it legal? Yes, it's legal. It's recognized not only in the United States, it's also recognized in certain United States Supreme Court decisions. It's recognized in England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. A good example is the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Queen Mother. Both of them are corporation soul and duly recognized as that. But it's not only recognized in those statutes, it's recognized recognized also in case law. It's recognized in practice. We now know that the Queen Mother writes all of the checks for all the orphans and all the widows in the United Kingdom, and she writes it out of her personal checkbook. She has never given Parliament the authority to do that. She has maintained that that's her role as Queen Mother, and it's the office of Queen who is responsible for taking care of widows and orphans, and so she handles that by herself and does not allow Parliament to do it, as you see in the United States, perhaps with a welfare system. When I say that it is legal to do it, there are ways that it should be applied, and then there are ways that it should not be applied. If someone were to take a corporation sole today and attempt to operate a business, let's say it's a copying business, and you attempted to run the copying business inside the corporation sole, that would not be an appropriate application of the concept. Let's take one that's a little closer, a healing ministry. If one is a physician licensed by the state and one attempts to run and practice medicine inside the corporation sole, this would not be an appropriate application. If we rework the understanding and rewrite and redescribe what the physician does as a healing ministry with or without compensation, and it's one which is soundly based on the teachings of Christ about healing, and it's carried out as part of that commission, then that type of healing ministry inside a corporation sole may be an appropriate use. The term illegal in the law needs some definition. The term illegal is the equivalent of something where you have not done something according to the appropriate form. There are two words, illegal and unlawful, and they are opposites. When someone says something is illegal, what they're meaning and what they signify is it's not done on the appropriate form. There are appropriate ways to carry out this corporation sole and to apply it, and there are inappropriate ways. If you feel as though it's a calling that the Lord has made upon you to do something for His kingdom, to carry out His will, to glorify His presence in this earth, then it's an appropriate application of the corporation sole. If it is anything other than that, then I think you need to pray on it very carefully and look at it carefully and listen very carefully and then do what the Lord leads you. Is a corporation sole the same as a trust? The answer to that is no. In a trust, you have three parties, not one. And those three parties in the trust, if it's a statutory trust, are regulated and created by the statute that specifically authorizes this trust to operate inside some environment. In a corporation sole, the distinguishing characteristic is that this particular structure is one person under the authority of God. It's very, very different than a business partnership, a different type of corporation, a sole corporation, and other types of vehicles that you find in a business setting. Because the corporation sole is one person, the interesting thing biblically about it is the house can never be divided against itself, because what would the argument be if it's just one human being in relationship to God? In a trust structure, you have at least three parties. You have the party that creates it, the trustor. You have the party that looks over it, that's the trustee. And then you have this beneficiary who is to receive some benefit as the consequence of this trust operating in the world. So you have three potential competing interests where the house could be divided against itself. This is not the case in the corporation sole. In the corporation sole, you've simply said, Father, I understand you own everything. And because you own everything, you've given me stewardship over these resources. What would you like me to do with them today to glorify your presence in this earth? That's a corporation sole. And it distinguishes itself from these other structures in that they are secularly oriented. The corporation sole is vertically oriented. So the other structures are horizontal in their relationships, and the corporation sole is vertical in the way that you operate according to God's will and what you hear Him ask you to do with the resources He's given you. Can a church be a corporation sole, or is it not already a corporation sole? In some cases, that's true. It is a corporation sole. The diocese and archdiocese of the Catholic Church are set up as corporation sole, but it's not often true of hierarchical Protestant churches who have, over the last 20 to 25 years, been led by appropriate counsel or inappropriate counsel to use the 501c3 vehicle in order to carry out the church's purposes. Up until Until recently, that choice seemed like it was the right choice because the church didn't seem to experience any significant difficulties with making this choice of a 501c3 corporation. These particular churches are now being looked at very carefully by organizations, taxing organizations, and state organizations that want to inquire into their business affairs. Churches that are in a 501c3 classification must have some kind of a governing board. It may be 2 people, it may be 3, it may be 10, it may be 30. But when that board is imposed upon the corporate structure in the church setting, the potential for the church being divided against itself is sewn into the fabric of that church structure. In a corporation's soul, that's not the case. The corporation's soul is a vertical integration where there is one individual under authority with God directing that individual's activities. That particular office carries on in perpetuity. So the way a corporation's soul is set up is shown and demonstrated by its name. Each corporation's soul must have certain things in order for it to be recognized, and one of them is a particular type of name. In most instances, it is called the office of the presiding, and then you fill in the blank. It could be pastor, it could be deacon, it could be apostle, it could be priest, it could be rabbi. The office of that name of, and then it's a church or a congregation or a ministry or a mission or a sacred order. And then the interesting words that follow are with a comma, and his successors, comma, a corporation soul. Most of the state statutes that recognize corporation soul ask that this type of language appear so that the name is rather long, so that there's no tendency of a third party to look at this corporation and say, oh, that's just a normal other type of corporation. They realize it because the name is so long. The other reason is, and it has to do with the holding of land. The corporation soul holds all of the property as a steward for the Lord, and it holds the property in perpetuity. This means that that property can't be taken away from the corporation soul. It's given to the corporation soul, the office that is, forever. And each successor, say over 700 years, is treated exactly the same as the original party who was the original officer when that corporation soul took form. So even though the successor may be 700 years in the future, the same rights, the same duties, and the same obligations that apply to the original officer now applies to this particular officer who now stands in the original officer's shoes. Can a corporation's soul do all the things which other corporations can do? For example, can a corporation's soul own property? Can a corporation's soul enter into a loan agreement? Can a corporation's soul enter into a lease agreement? Can a corporation's soul enter into the general contracts of the world and do those things which other corporations do? The answer is that the statutes provide that they can. Even though the state provides the specific benefits, in the Articles of Incorporation, which we recommend people use, we recommend in those articles, as you record them, that you deny these benefits. Just because the state gives you a benefit does not mean that you have to accept the benefit. If the Lord tells you, owe no man any money, and then you go borrow money, and you experience a difficult time as a consequence of that, is it because the bank is the problem or because you violated the principle? If the Lord says, don't charge someone interest or usury, and because the state says it's okay, participate in this benefit that the state licenses, then under those circumstances, it goes wrong or it goes sour. Is it the contract which is wrong or the people that you're involved with, or is it because you violated another principle? So we have taken a look at these statutes and said, just because you give us these 15 or 18 or 20 different rights doesn't mean that we're going to accept them. There are certain ones we accept, and there are others that we don't. One of the ones we accept is the right to hold property. But how? Do we buy the property or do we receive it as an inheritance? The principle of receiving it as an inheritance is that God says, I give you the land. You shall not sell the land outright, for you are strangers and sojourners with me in it. So if we're not supposed to sell the land, even though the state says we can, then we're obviously not supposed to buy the land, even though the state says we can. And when we sell or when we buy and something happens which we don't like, is it because we followed the principle and we did what the Lord asked us to do, or is it because we disobeyed? Will it protect your assets? Will it protect resources that you think are yours, that you own? That regardless of the resources that God has given you stewardship over, and regardless of the fact that I've already indicated that this is not something where you attempt to protect assets or resources out of a sense of fear. That a corporation sole vehicle is not to be used to protect resources or assets that you think would be subject to tax laws or some kind of confiscation laws otherwise. It's been my experience that when you do what the Lord asks you to do you honestly believe He would punish you for doing that? The answer to that question has to be obviously no, because if He would punish you for doing the right thing, what would be the incentive? If I do this, will I be okay? You will be tried and you will be tested. We all are. No matter how much money you have, no matter how much you don't have, no matter what you're called to do in life, one of the things that is absolutely clear about this walk on this planet serving the Lord is that you will face trials and you will face testings and you will face temptation. The only question that will ever remain is when you had that come up in your life, what did you do? And if you sat there and complained or murmured about it or thought you'd done something wrong, there was one result. If you recognize that despite the fact that you made the right choice, despite the fact that you were following what the Lord asked you to do in this particular case, or that, the Lord always promises that He'll deliver you through it. He didn't say that no weapon would ever be formed. He just said that no weapon formed against you would prosper. He didn't say the arrows wouldn't be fashioned and shot toward us in our lives. He just said they won't hit you. So the truth of the matter is you will go through storms, no matter what choice you make. But the question is, are you going through the storm for the glory of His kingdom, to serve His will, to do what He asks you to do, or are you doing it on your own? The corporation soul is a way of honoring that relationship that God's asked you to do. It's a rare privilege. It's something where the Lord has said, I want you to do this specifically for my kingdom. This is the way I want you to do it. Here's what I'm going to give you to do it. Here's the vision, and here's the provision. Now, go do it.